object now known as the Buga Sphere, a mysterious flying sphere recovered in the town of Buga, Colombia.
What if an AI built to predict spacecraft failures just warned us about something that isn't from Earth? Reports say Grok 4, Elon Musk's latest artificial intelligence, analyzed a mysterious metallic orb found in Colombia.
Without wings. And from the moment it appeared, the mystery began.
And saw something coming. It's called the Buga Sphere, and scientists say it defies every known law of physics. No seams, no power source, yet it's alive with energy.
It's certainly real. It's using an energy field, a type of anti-gravity effect.
Grok 4's models point to one terrifying outcome, a breach. But what exactly is it warning us about, and how close are we to finding out? The orb that shouldn't be.
In March of this year, a UFO was allegedly spotted over the town of Buga, Colombia.
It started with a streak across the Colombian sky, silent, silver, and fast. On March 2nd, 2025, residents near the small town of Buga looked up and saw something that didn't belong there. A metallic sphere, roughly the size of a basketball, zigzagged through the air before descending in a series of impossible maneuvers. It didn't fall like debris or drift like a balloon. It moved with intent. Then, just as suddenly, it dropped. No explosion, no fireball, no trail of smoke. When investigators reached the site, they expected wreckage. Instead, they found perfection. Lying in the soil was an orb of flawless metal. No cracks, no dents, no burn marks. It wasn't hot to the touch, just cool and impossibly smooth. Scientists from several universities were called in, including researchers from UNAM and the University of San Francisco de Quito. What they discovered left them speechless. The sphere had no visible seams or welds, as though it had been formed from a single piece of material. Under imaging scans, 3 distinct layers emerged, each composed of a different metal or alloy, none matching standard manufacturing methods.
When scanning the surface of the sphere, the engravings do not appear so that we can scan them.
Even stranger, embedded within those layers were smaller metallic beads connected by thin filaments that resembled wiring, all leading to a dense central core described as a chip. The sphere defied every test they ran. It didn't behave like any known satellite component or aerospace artifact. More confusing still, it didn't seem broken. There were no signs of impact stress, no deformation, and no fragmentation at the crash site. Instruments showed that the soil directly beneath the orb had undergone something extraordinary, molecular disruption up to 1 meter deep, as if the very bonds holding matter together had been weakened. The soil had not been burned, but rather sterilized. Plants didn't grow there, microorganisms were eliminated. Still, very surprisingly, no radiation was found by the detectors. It was like the energy had simply vanished from the area, but no traces were left behind. The first major deviation was the object's mass. In the first weighing, it was at 16 pounds. However, upon re-weighing after a couple of weeks, the numbers showed 22, with no alteration in handling or the environment surrounding it.
Weighed 2 kilos at the beginning, and through the days, the sphere went up to 6 kilos.
The object then started gaining weight. This kind of behavior is not described in physics. Matter cannot merely pop up within a blocked-off system. The only possible conclusion, although still a thin one, was that the object was absorbing energy or matter from its environment in a way not yet measurable by humans. The next anomaly was the second one. The picture that the thermal imaging was showing was of a cold and heat sink, not a heat radiator. Several degrees cooler than the ambient air were how the surroundings appeared, and the sphere was constantly drawing heat from the environment, almost like a living heat sink. A technician's remark was to say, "It's like a fridge that just doesn't need power, and it's cooling not just itself, but the whole world."
They thought that they probably froze it, and then they bring it out to make it look like it's special, which is very possible.
The interplay between spontaneous weight gain and active cooling occurred inexplicably. Each trial carried the enigma further. Was it a glitch in a sophisticated program, a scanning device, a strange yet natural occurrence? The authorities cordoned off the site and transferred the object to a high-security location. No matter what the ball was made of, it was certainly not a silent object. It was working on something. That's when the news surfaced of the involvement of Grok 4, Elon Musk's latest AI, in the modeling of the spot. Because the AI's conclusion wasn't about what the orb was, it was about what it might soon become. Grok 4 runs the future. When reports surfaced that Grok 4, Elon Musk's newest AI from XAI, had been tasked with analyzing the Buga Sphere, many dismissed it as internet speculation. But if you understand how Grok 4 operates, the rumor makes unsettling sense. Unlike earlier models confined to static databases, Grok 4 works as a live system. It searches, reads, and learns from the internet in real time, gathering scientific papers, telemetry reports, and even anonymous data dumps.
The growth of a human, faster human learns and gains conscious awareness and understanding, and AI is advancing.
It doesn't just process information, it models it, creating predictive simulations called digital twins. And that's where the story takes its most chilling turn. A digital twin is more than a 3D rendering. It's a full computational replica, a dynamic version of an object that updates itself based on incoming data. Engineers already use these to test aircraft systems or spacecraft navigation. They allow scientists to simulate stress, heat transfer, or failure modes without risking the real hardware. Now imagine pointing that kind of analytical power at an object whose physics don't match anything we've ever seen. If Grok 4 created a digital twin of the Buga Sphere, it could virtually open the object without touching it, modeling its inner systems, thermal exchanges, and material reactions at subatomic precision. That's reportedly what happened. Unverified posts claim Grok 4 ingested all publicly available data about the sphere. Photographs, soil analysis, heat maps, and partial lab notes leaked through research networks. Using those, the AI generated a predictive stability model. The results, if even partially true, are alarming. Grok 4 identified the sphere's cooling behavior not as a feature, but as a requirement. The cooling isn't an optional effect, it's what keeps the internal quantum system stable. Lose that balance, and the object doesn't just warm up, it destabilizes. To get the point why it is so important, you have to consider that as if you were a fault-detecting AI. The RAI-SR systems are using the machine learning engine developed and trained by NASA itself to carry out the task of monitoring the spacecraft. They are programmed to detect the slightest variation in temperature or voltage and to alert the human engineers in advance, hours or even days before the problem becomes obvious to them. Grok 4 is based on the same idea, but it works on a global scale. It does not just say, "This is happening." Instead, it observes and predicts the future. Accordingly, when its computation of the Buga Sphere began to present a pattern of escalating pressure and cooling systems behaving erratically, the AI chose to raise a red flag as a potential failure mode, somewhat similar to a situation where a quantum computer cluster overheats. To put it in the most basic terms, Grok 4's model simulated a self-sustained reaction. The fragile balance between the sphere's weight and the cooling can be lost. Once that is lost, a massive amount of energy stored in any way is released immediately. Although the scenario might be likened to the models of nuclear meltdowns and magnet quench events, it is still not understandable how it may happen, or the scale at which it may occur. Now, check this out. It's not just the prediction that is unsettling, and this one is even more so. Grok 4 is far from an early AI that used to hallucinate. It just computes probabilities and attaches confidence scores. The leaked data summary mentioned that there was an 82% probability that Buga Sphere's cooling would be in critical imbalance state in the next phase. However, it did not say what that phase was. If this information is correct, it means that Grok 4 is assuming that the object that the quantum entanglement is composed of is gradually progressing towards being unstable.
16 spheres on the inside. And when we talk about fiber optics as well,
Not in terms of cracking, not due to an explosion, but in terms of alteration. Maybe self-correcting, maybe getting ready for something. Whatever it is, the AI undoubtedly came to the point. If the cooling system fails, the quantum cluster inside will get out. And that's when scientists realized this wasn't just an object to study. It was a system that might already be reacting to being observed. But before understanding what Grok 4 truly warned about, we have to understand what makes the sphere's impossible cold so dangerous to lose. Cooling that breaks textbooks. To understand why Grok 4's warning sent shockwaves through scientific circles, you have to grasp just how impossible the Buga Sphere's cooling really is. In every known quantum system on Earth, temperature isn't just a condition, it's the rulebook. A quantum processor, a superconducting magnet, or even a cryogenic chamber must stay unimaginably cold to work. We're talking temperatures near 0.01 Kelvin, 1/100th of a degree above absolute zero. That's 300 times colder than the vacuum of space.
To present initial scientific findings surrounding the object now known as the Buga Sphere.
Maintaining that kind of chill requires towering machinery, complex pumping systems, and enough electricity to power a small town. Now imagine that level of precision inside a smooth, seamless orb the size of a basketball, with no visible seams, no vents, no power lines. Yet the readings coming from the Buga Sphere suggest exactly that. The object doesn't just stay cold, it actively cools its surroundings, drawing heat out of the air, the soil, even nearby instruments. The temperature differential remains constant, like a living cryostat. This isn't just strange, it's physics turned inside out. Scientists at MIT and Fermilab, when shown the data, were reportedly baffled. One physicist described it as a cryogenic system that violates energy conservation. In a normal setup, cooling something requires energy input, compressors, pumps, and controlled gas cycles. The Buga Sphere does the opposite. It absorbs energy while becoming colder. In doing so, it appears to be gaining mass. That alone hints at a process so advanced that it borders on impossible: negative mass compensation. The current speculative narrative, based on pieces of stolen lab notes, indicates that the sphere is equipped with a negative mass field, a region where the regular energy-inertia ratio changes its direction. In the traditional view, energy brings mass, energy removal brings mass decline. However, a negative mass field would render that illogical. By absorbing some type of energy, the field might be getting thicker, thus effectively weightier. At the same time, it is reducing the temperature of the space around. That could account for the sudden gain in the sphere's weight. When that scenario proves true, the cooling is not merely a byproduct, but a process of careful equilibrium, keeping the whole system together. Visualize a dam that is doing its work by holding back an interstellar ocean. The cold is the pressure that is necessary to make the dam withstand.
are these fiber optics verified? Are they terrestrial? Is this something that comes from somewhere else?
Get rid of that cold, and the dam is gone, letting loose all the power in one sudden moment. Quantum clusters are a theoretical arrangement of quantum entangled particles confined under extremely stringent conditions that could instantaneously perish under a slight mismatch of the thermodynamic balance. The blowing up of the superconducting magnets during the quench blasts is a good example. The shift from cold to hot is nothing less than the breaking of a tensed steel wire. Consequently, the Buga Sphere may not just be an ordinary object. Quite the contrary. It might be a transformer, a quantum system that is self-sustained and stays rock-stable due to perfect thermal control. The worry grows that, currently, this system might have broken thermally. The scientists are complaining about the minor waving happening in the cooling field and the faintly observed surface thumps, indicative of the efforts of the sphere to keep the balance. Grok 4's predictions are valid. The shifts and commotions in it are not benign, but rather a warning of the imbalance to come through the collapse of the system in a disastrous manner. For when such a system collapses, it will not end silently, but very suddenly. But how exactly would that failure unfold? What does a quantum cluster breach even look like in physical terms? The answer may redefine what we think explosion means. Breach cascade. Step by step. Start with a twitch, not a blast. In Grok 4's modelled runs, the first sign isn't dramatic. It's a tiny rise in internal temperature and a faint wobble in the cooling field. Think of a violin string drifting a hair off pitch. That drift matters because the sphere's balance appears binary, either perfectly cold or sliding toward runaway.
The 16 spheres are these. These go inside the sphere.
As the cooling margin narrows, phonons heat that were once trapped or siphoned away begin to linger. The cluster inside stops behaving like a smooth superfluid and starts to pin in places, microscopic hotspots where order breaks first. Then comes the quench moment. In superconducting magnets, this is when one section warms, resistance spikes, and stored energy dumps in milliseconds. The sphere's analog would be depinning across the quantum cluster. One hotspot triggers another until the entire structure sheds coherence. Cooling collapses faster than sensors can sample. What was a silent heat sink flips polarity, no longer absorbing ambient energy, but expelling it. Energy does not choose polite exits. A rapid field collapse would release what the system was holding in 3 ways at once. Thermal burst, local air flashes warm, moisture snaps to vapor, frost retreats in an instant. Nearby surfaces may craze or spall as they jump through micro-phase changes. Electromagnetic spike. A broadband pulse couples into every conductive loop. Bench cables, building wiring, sensor leads, even rebar in concrete. Breakers trip, UPS units chatter, oscilloscopes flatline. Timescale, tens of microseconds to a few milliseconds.
We found the wires for the fiber optics, but no wires inside the sphere. All the wires are
too fast for human reaction, barely enough for automated aborts. The near-field footprint could encompass the room and adjoining spaces. The mid-field effect rides wires and ducts much farther. If the object's field couples beyond the building, the pulse can leak into feeder lines, antenna masts, and anything tall enough to act as an improvised radiator. Grid operators call this kind of insult a common mode event. Many things fail at once for the same reason. Timing of the far-field risk is key to the website. If the pulse spectrum reaches through into VHF/UHF or L-band, low Earth orbit satellites passing that sky slice may get momentary interference such as dropped telemetry, GPS jitter, or star tracker glitches. Starlink is actually a very resilient constellation despite single-site noise. However, if the collapse becomes a longer ringing effect, secondary oscillations during the death of the oscillation, the interference window expands from milliseconds to seconds, enough to cut across a pass overhead. How would the room be like? The lights flicker out. The air in your chest thumps as if a door has been slammed far away. A very small amount of silence. Then the alarms that are still functioning stop and start screaming. The scope traces are all white. The log files end in the middle of the sample. Everything fragile that depended on accuracy The cryogenic seals, ceramic standoffs, thin solder joints has now got invisible fractures. There are choices when the intervention comes, and they are already limited to seconds. The decision which of these seconds one will take, however, is not determined by mere physical circumstances. That's where the cascade leaves the lab and enters the world. A breach doesn't just release energy, it triggers a race. Race, risk, and restraint. Once word spread that the Buga Sphere might contain a working quantum cluster, secrecy became impossible. Even before the object reached a secure research site, intelligence chatter had already shifted tone, from curiosity to competition. The United States, China, and Russia reportedly placed monitoring assets over Western Colombia within 48 hours of the crash. Orbital imagery from commercial satellites showed new activity near the recovery perimeter, temporary structures, shielding tents, and what analysts identified as mobile cryo units. To the public, it looked like containment. To governments, it looked like an opportunity. Every major power has its own version of Project Deep Core, classified programs probing exotic physics for military advantage. To them, the Buga Sphere isn't a curiosity. It's the holy grail of field control. Negative mass, if proven real, implies propulsion without reaction mass. Self-cooling, if repeatable, implies limitless energy storage. Together, they rewrite every constraint on power, transport, and defense. Whoever understands the mechanism first doesn't just win a patent race, they leapfrog entire eras of technology. But racing toward knowledge carries its own danger. Grok 4's modeled breach scenarios aren't cinematic explosions, they're precision warnings. The AI projects are escalating instability if thermal balance continues to drift, and that drift appears to be accelerating as labs increase data collection. The more instruments pressed against the sphere, the more the system seems to react. It's the paradox of modern discovery. Observation itself may be stressful, yet halting research invites geopolitical panic. Each nation suspects the others of learning faster, of hiding results, of building replicas in secret. There is a continual tightening of rules inside the laboratory. Currently, the experiments are carried out remotely through data cables hidden under shielding. The power supply is cut off and cooling systems have been installed 3 times. On the contrary, outside the facility, the noise is unbearable. The rumors of news leaks have ignited speculations about extraterrestrial probes and quantum weapons. The situation has also caused economic disruption in some markets. Politicians openly urge, they say, while security organizations put more restrictions, it would calm the people for whom there is every reason to be afraid. No one knows yet whether Grok 4 was acting for or against. A machine predicting catastrophic failure doesn't soothe investors or generals, it goes against both. At the same time, the second tier and private entities follow the leaked data. Open-sourced physicists, corporate quantum teams, and even hobby researchers pick up raw streams, simulate the data in various manners, and integrate their findings back into the public server. It has been suggested by certain other people that the figures have been misread. The background noise levels are such that the signals are very hard to find through them. However, one factor that has appeared in all the analyses is the unchanged trend of the system towards instability. The mass of the sphere is still gradually increasing. The pattern of the cooling feature it emits is still pulsating. So, what do you think? Is Grok 4 warning us about a real technological threat? Or are we witnessing the birth of something beyond human understanding? If you want to keep exploring stories that blend cutting-edge science, AI predictions, and the unexplained, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And when you're done here, watch the next video on your screen. It dives even further into the strange future we may already be living in.